or will take that intervention beyond the pilot area. Second, our idea is also that people who are not, or the institutions who are not part of this project, should learn and should also take some key takeaways from this, I would say, project, where they can apply that to their own businesses. So with that, we started with 3 hypotheses, and then on the basis of that, we are doing 4 pilots. And this webinar, we will be talking about, we did a baseline study that what is happening in the industry right now, and especially with the 6 partners. So whatever data information that you will see now will have a context of those partners, which can be to some extent extrapolated to the entire industry, but cannot be, because we have a sample of these 6 partners who are working with us. However, the findings will give you a lot of ideas, points to think on, that what can you learn and kind of apply that into your own business. If I go to the first hypothesis, we believe that this industry need to have a better market fit product portfolio, which customer wants, and BC also want to sell because it's profitable for them to do so. And these products should be a market fit. It should be suitable for the customers, primarily women. Through the new product, we want to have more number of transactions, resulting in the viability of agents. So that is the first thing that we want to do, because the core of this entire project is that we want to make BC agents viable. That is one. Second, and also to promote more women BC agents into a BC industry, which is roughly at around 8 to 14% if you look at the average level. And these products that we want to develop and we want to test into this project should address the challenges which is related to access, suitability of the target segment, and also increasing the agent revenue. Second hypothesis, we believe that if the product is perfect, we also need to improve the training and capacity development of not only of the BC agents, but also of the institutions as a whole, from the top management to the middle management, and also to the field people. And because of it, we introduced a concept called change management, where we picked up some, I would say, some specific goals of that institution, and we're trying to solve that how can we kind of arrive at viability following that change management goals. So under this hypothesis, we are giving trainings to the field team on gender aspects and also on soft skills like how to sell products, how to be more considerate with the customers, how to help them in case if they are facing any challenge. Because we found that in many of the trainings that currently industry is giving, it is more about the products and about the process, and lesser about the software aspect, that how to deal with the customers, what to do when there is certain issues with that customer, how to support them, how to do that. So by doing this, we are thinking that if we are giving a better service to the customer, they will come back again and again to that channel, leading to the viability of the agent. In this hypothesis, we are also putting a special focus on women as a customer and women as a BC agent as well. That how can we empower them more by giving them training tools, by giving them more, I would say, better training, better support to them. And the final hypothesis, which we believe that if the product is perfect, we have given them enough training, but the customers are not aware that what are the services available at BC Point. Because most of them are only aware that they can only do a catch in or catch out, which means that they can either deposit money or can take out. But we believe that they are doing a lot of things. And we also believe that currently, if you look by the market standard, around 80% of the revenue of BC company comes from catch in, catch out, and around 15 to 20% will come from non-catch in, catch out products like insurance, like assisted e-commerce. So these are certain things that we believe that customers should know, that what are the other services available at the BC Point which they can avail. So in this, we are doing different marketing initiatives, like there's one traditional training camps that we are organizing. Second is, and we are using a new augmented reality application using which a customer can play the game, can also learn about financial literacy. Third, we are also doing certain things like a very low cost marketing activities in terms of painting a wall of a BC agents and trying to see that can a common branding across industry will have any impact onto BC footfall and viability or not. And also, we have also developed our own GLEAP application in which we are giving training to the customers. Because of COVID, many of the customers and also BC agents are preferring more of a digital do-it-yourself kind of a training and not a training where they want to go through a traditional mode of classroom training. That's what we found in our training need assessment report as well. So these are different hypotheses and different interventions that we are doing under the project. Now the CII team, which is the monitoring and evaluation team at Grameen Foundation, will talk about that. What are those important points that we found in our baseline study? And we will share that with you. If you have any questions, please type that into the Q&A portion, and then we will pose that to the panelists. So thank you so much. And now over to Rahul to take this up.
Thank you, Piyush, for setting the context so wonderfully. Now, I, along with my colleague Gaurav, will walk you through the research, design, result, and synthesis from this agent diagnostic study for beads. So this research study used a mixed method approach, leveraging both quantitative and qualitative research methods as lines of evidence. The quantitative research method included agent and customer surveys with 420 agents and 422 customers. The qualitative methods included focus group discussions with customers, key informant interviews with agents, BCNM staffs, and mid-managers. Additionally, we used system-generated data as additional lines of evidence. Next slide. Yeah. So, as many of you know, the term business correspondent is local to India and is widely used as a synonym to cash-in, cash-out agent. That's the globally used term. And for the purpose of our today's presentation, I'll be using the term agent for an easier comprehension of everyone. So moving on, let's see what these findings are. In the next few slides, we'll primarily focus on questions on the agent profile, models, practices, and the business viability side. Yeah. So who are these agents we are talking about here? And you're seeing one of them on the slide. She's Malti, and we met her during the field surveys. She was married off at an early age and had studied only till higher secondary. While she was socially active and part of a self-help group, she still felt lost. But her aspirations got wings as she started working as an agent at the age of 32. And she's really glad about her newfound identity, and the glee in her eyes is a testament to that you can see on the in her picture. So like Malti, another 43% of the agents we met were women. And the average age of agents was about 35, and they were serving rural as well as urban geographies. And interestingly, 79% of these agents considered their role as an agent as their primary source of income, and about a third of their households relied mainly on agents' income for sustenance. And finally, if you look in terms of the maturity, so about close to 90% of the agents were working in their current role for at least past 6 months. So that sums up the agent profile that we interviewed. In terms of to the model that they practiced, on this slide, we are trying to decipher the nature of agent models being practiced in these pilot geographies. These are mainly through the lenses of engagement, exclusivity, earning, service delivery, and investments in their agent business. So as you'd see, 90% of the agents considered their role as a full-time job, and about 49% of the agents work exclusively with the BC Network Managers. That is, they offered products and services exclusively from the parent organization they were associated with. From the qualitative interactions we learned many agents were offering complementary services also that didn't compete with the services offered by the parent organizations. And in few cases, they also offered competing services. That is, if the routine service channel was down, then they would use that channel for delivering the services. Now, moving on, only a quarter of these agents were offering doorstep services, and about 80% of these agents had made some sort of personal investments or taken a loan to support their agent in business. And on an average, if you see that an agent had invested approximately 75,000 rupees, which is close to 1,000 US dollars, in his or her business. So that's the range of investment that they had, on an average investment that they had made in the business. And furthermore, all these agents, they would receive a commission on the product or services they were offering. And about 64% of these women also received a fixed amount for earning. So, and the balance 1/3 of these agents only had commissions as a source of earning as the income. Next. So on this slide, we are going to see how these agents were supported by the BC Network Managers in the terms of, say, marketing, financing, capacity building, etc. So getting on to the results. So the results suggested that 1 out of the 5 agents reported receiving some sort of financial support towards working capital for their business from the BCNMs. Agents expressed that the liquidity management was manageable on their own, even without receiving any financial support from the BCNMs. And more than 2/3 of these agents had received some sort of marketing support from their BCNMs. It was in form of collateral such as posters, banners, but other than that, no other form of marketing support was reported by the agents during the study. So moving on to the training and capacity building side, it was mostly in the form of groups or one-to-one training, and a small proportion of the agents received trainings through digital platforms also. And close to 3/4 of the agents had to travel for attending trainings, and it would usually happen less than once in a month. And in most of the instances, the training satisfaction amongst agents was high. So now moving on to the product and services that they offered, you could see that we had actually inquired about a larger set of product and services, which was subsequently clubbed into 6 types of product suites that we are talking about here, as you can see on the slide. Of these 6, banking and digital financial services were the most common product suite being offered. I think Piyush also talked about this earlier. And close to half of them offered financial advisory services also. And this was often without any monetary incentives. And they did it as a tool for customer engagement. And about 2/3 of the agents facilitated access to government schemes and services such as application for Aadhaar card or PAN card or enrolling for any scholarship schemes, etc. And when it came to offering credit services, about 1/3 of these agents supported loan recovery, and about 17% of these agents worked on loan sourcing as well. As you can see that we see a higher percentage of investments and social security products here. However, the data states what was being offered at the agent's desk, not what was the client proactively using. I think related data you would see in subsequent slides as well. So interestingly, half of these agents were extending a maximum of 2 types of product suites. And this is important, as you would see in our subsequent analysis in upcoming slides. And during the qualitative survey, the agents reported in terms of government services and schemes, they would facilitate access through, say, filling up forms, submission of applications. And this was also a kind of a self-driven initiative for the agents, not a standardized suite of services that was being offered on the behalf of BCNM or the bank. So yeah. Now we come to the primary question that I think Piyush also set the context about. What affects the viability of the business correspondent or the agent. The next few slides will discuss the viability in the terms of income and satisfaction. Next slide, please. Yeah. So let's first see the current status of the income for these agents. We have taken INR 5,000 rupees or USD 65 as a cutoff mark for today's presentation, just to help understand a few of the data points. And in total, about 34% of the surveyed agents earned above rupees 5,000. And if you'd apply a gender lens to it, we learned about that the 45% of the male agents earned more than 5,000 rupees in comparison to only 27% of the women agents. And this highlighted the existing gender gap in the agent's income as well. To the secondary data, we also saw similar trends where male agents had a higher average per month income, close to 191 USD, while the reported average income for women agents was less, close to 123 US dollars, and the average income of an agent for the sample was close to 159 US dollars. And in comparison, if you compare the secondary data with the primary data what we have reported earlier, then you could see that there was slight underreporting of income in our primary survey, which doesn't come as a surprise. Usually people underreport their income. In terms of change in income, if you look, 2/3 of the agents acknowledged they had seen a gradual increase in income since onboarding, while the remaining stated their income has remained stagnant or taken a dip. And agents who reported an increase in income attributed it to the change in, say, client acquisition and retention, and an overall increase in the demand at the client level. Whereas those who reported dip or stagnancy in income, they primarily attributed it to the decreased commission margins, lesser incentive, loss of repeat clients, and the lack of product diversity as the reason. The next slide, please. So what are the factors that affect the income level of BCs? And now that we have a solid understanding of the agent profile, business model, support systems, and current income level, we would move to find out the key factors that affect the income level of an agent. We tested the relationship between the agent income and other independent variables. Over here, we have presented mostly those which yielded statistically significant results. And before I talk about these significant factors, let me quickly help you on how to read these graphs. On the vertical axis, we have listed the independent variables, say age, that can influence the income of an agent. If the horizontal line crosses the bold vertical lines in black, say in the case of female BC agent, then the factor is not agents. Then the factor is not associated with the agent's likelihood of seeing an income gain. If the two lines don't cross, and if it is on the right side of the vertical line, it has a positive impact. If it shifts towards the left, it has a negative impact. So now looking at the factors, so altogether the factors which affected the agent income were gender, location, engagement, and training. So a female agent, a female BC agent was less likely to experience an income gain compared to a male counterpart. Location, agents serving in urban or semi-urban area were less likely to experience an income gain compared to agents in rural areas. Herein, it needs to be noted that this finding is more on the income gain, not on their current income level. We also observed that the part-time engagement and extending services exclusively from one BCNM hurt the chances of income gain. Interestingly, engaging in routine self-learning increases the likelihood of experiencing income gain for the agents compared to having a facilitated training less than once a month. So next, yeah. So how does the product diversity, the hypothesis Pius also talked about earlier, affect the income opportunity of a business, of an agent? So we had earlier mentioned that about 48% of the agents were extending only one or two types of product suits at max. Now, as the baseline results kind of confirm that the diversification of the product basket leads to an economic viability of the agent. Here in the graph says that if the agent is extending 5 or 6 different type of product suits, they have a significantly higher likelihood of moving on to a higher income range. If an agent offered product from 5 different product suits, he or she was 4.5 times more likely to experience an income gain in comparison to those who had only one type of product. Yeah, so we discussed the economic viability of an agent. Another dimension that would affect the agent viability was the satisfaction with their role. Herein we found that female agents were less likely to have higher satisfaction with their role than their male counterparts. We also observed that agents in urban or semi-urban areas were more likely to have higher expectation and satisfaction levels than those in rural areas. The training was another factor influencing the role satisfaction. Regarding the training, we found that more frequent trainings led to agents being less likely to have higher satisfaction levels. Plausible explanations could be loss of opportunity, cost, maybe they have to travel, so they incur some cost. But yeah, now I hand it over to my colleague Gaurav Sinha to walk us through the rest of the presentation. Gaurav?
Yeah. So thanks, Rahul, for guiding us through the research approach and sharing the insights on agent business, the economic viability, and the agent's role satisfaction. Now, I will be taking you all through another important aspect that we explored through our baseline research, which is training and capacity building. So the right training and capacitation are important factors that affect both agents' viability and experiences. So in the next slide, we will explore what were the observed gaps here. So during our interactions, we observed exposure to training was limited to a few core areas that included basic banking and device and platform related skills. Furthermore, only a handful of agents had received training on business skills and soft skills. and training on grievance redressal and gender sensitization was rare. So Piyush also talked about these things, that the trainings have regularly focused on product and services and not on the softer side of the business. So there lies a gap in the training and capacitation. We also found that the training content was not widely available in local languages, and often staff had to facilitate the local dissemination. So it was observed that the existing implementation of training had counterintuitive results, where frequent trainings led to lower training satisfaction. We also saw if more frequent trainings were happening, the roles satisfaction was also compromised, as Rahul had iterated in the earlier slides. Moving on, let us shift our focus to other key stakeholder, the client. In the upcoming slide, we will see who these clients are, how they interact with the agents, and what are their preferences. So in a survey for the third pilot, 57% of the clients were women. These clients were middle-aged people in the late 30s. The average age was around 38 years. And more rural areas were including under this particular pilot. And the people, most of the clients were literate. In terms of interaction with the agent, around 58% of these clients had known the agent for over a year. A significant proportion of the clients routinely met with the agents at least once a week, and the clients usually reached out to by the agents themselves to inform about the product and services available. A little over a third of the clients had received any kind of financial literacy training. We further inquired about the preferences of these clients, and a majority of the clients said that they seek services at an agent service point. We had earlier referenced that only a quarter of the agents were offering doorstep services, and it is likely that this particular observation is mirroring the observation that whether a doorstep service is available or not. Also, around half of the clients expressed they would be open to learning using a mobile or internet based platform. Moving on, let us see the current awareness and uses of the product suites that are being offered. So in this slide, we can see almost 90% of the clients were aware of at least 4 different types of product suites. The awareness about different product suites is considerably high. However, apart from banking and DFS, the uses of products and services is relatively dismal compared to the level of awareness. We found that the current implementation of training that the clients received positively impacted the awareness, but not the users. Users would usually depend on several other factors as well, like including accessibility, client need, meaningful use cases for the clients, etc., and not just on awareness. So maybe future iterations of training should focus on helping clients understand the use case of a product, while the BCNMs enable greater access by diversifying the agent portfolio. Now, next, we also assess the consumer empowerment status of the clients. We use the Social Protection Task Force promoted consumer empowerment framework to assess the empowerment level of the clients. We observed gender-based inequities where women clients were less likely to be more empowered compared to the male clients. You can also see this in the chart where the line for the females is the average is actually lesser compared to male clients. So we further observed that age was another factor, relevant factor, where younger customers were more likely to be empowered. We further observed that gender-based inequities, as you can see in the graph, women were less likely. Moving on, we observed that these clients voiced gaps in knowledge about where to seek information and their ability to compare similar products. So this, in essence, would limit their ability to choose appropriate products and services. Now, tying up all this with our current focus on agents in today's presentation, I would like to highlight the critical role played by the agents in driving consumer empowerment. Agents served as a trusted channel for client education, as highlighted earlier by Rahul as well. About half of the agents offered financial advisory services, and this was further reinforced by the finding that most of the clients would reach out to agents for seeking information on product and services. Regression results suggested that if the client knew the agents for more than 6 months, they were more likely to be aware and use a more diverse set of products and services. Furthermore, if we summarize all the statements that we have came across just now, so this suggests that the agent enables and empowers the customer to use a more diverse set of products and services. This could further be actually complemented by a reliable mobile and internet-based platforms endorsed by the agent to enable client access to the information that they seek. This is also supported by the finding shared earlier in the earlier slides, where we stated that a significant proportion of the clients were open to using such mobile and internet-based platforms. So this was all from our side. We hope all of you found this session useful. Handing over to Poorna to take the session further.
Poorna, are you there?
Poorna, your setting for microphone.
Can you
might have
hear me?
shifted. Yeah.
Yeah, Poorna.
I'm
So
so sorry.
you can start the panel discussion.
Yeah, we can start the panel discussion. Yes, so the panel discussion, the theme for this is the BC agent model and the path to scale and the roadblocks. The session will be moderated by Emilio Hernandez, the senior financial sector specialist at CGAP. The panelists for the session are Bobby Gray, research director at Grameen Foundation, R.R. Kalyan, executive director at CDOT, Sasidhar Thumuluri, CEO Subke, Sunil Kulkarni, CEO, designate SRO and head BCFI, and last but certainly not the least, Prabhat Labh, CEO, Grameen Foundation, India. Emilio, hand over the panel to you.
Sorry, I was muted. Can you hear me?
Yes, absolutely.
Good afternoon, good evening, good morning to everybody joining. It's a pleasure to moderate this discussion with such a distinguished panelist. So we've heard very, very interesting things today from this study, this survey that GFI has conducted, which I personally find very, very interesting. I would like to kind of spark a discussion between our panelists, perhaps distinguishing different implications for different stakeholders coming from this work. And I'd like to start with implications for the digital finance service providers among our panelists, right? Because the GFI assessment really is showing how those BCs that are able to expand the list of valuable services can increase their activity rates and thereby their profitability rates. They become more viable. And we know that as you move more to rural areas, more away from the urban strongholds where there's a lot of people, and so agents can do a lot of transactions with just one service. As you move into rural areas where populations are more dispersed, you need to generate more transactions per customer, right? So that usually goes along with a more diverse suite of services. So you can see that there are providers from GFI's assessment that are moving beyond your now more common BC services like, money transfers, account opening, government disbursement, and they're incorporating new services like credit, insurance, pension, as well as non-financial services like solar, agribusiness, e-commerce, etc. So my question to DFS providers represented here in the panel is, what is the main business and regulatory challenges that you feel are being faced right now to scale the distribution of this wider suite of diverse valued services? What are some of the challenges that you're encountering to push this trend forward? Wonder who would like to start with this discussion. Maybe we go with Sashi, representing Subk.
Great, thanks, Emilio. And by the way, I'm sorry, I don't have the background that everybody has for some reason. Good to be here. Thank you for the invite. So Emilio, the question is quite pertinent to this project, and I must congratulate Grameen Foundation for taking a very big agenda, which is so central to the business that we do. Coming to your specific question, you're right, the rural areas are more challenging than urban, but in general, from the experience on the ground, what I would say is that, there is a set of financial services that are diverse enough to be able to be handled by agents is one part of it. And then you go beyond financial services, which are you talk about e-commerce and other things. Within the suite of financial services, we still are grappling with very basic level banking activities happening in larger part of BC network in India. This is primarily because either banks are liable to these for these networks to the regulators. So there is this arbitrage that is sometimes not available for agents. So they are restricted by their activity. So in that sense, the sponsor bank basically is sometimes not necessarily open about offering multiple services. The other aspect is, even from the agent's capacity point of view, there are some agents who are good in managing basic business, but when you add the complexity, I think it is not always easy for those agents to handle, the multiple services on the same platform. So that, basically talks about capacity building, market opportunity, and incentives associated with them and all. When it comes to female agents, this becomes even, one level more difficult, not because of the lack of ability or the lack of opportunity for them. It is more because there are of course less female agents in the ecosystem. That's one part of it. The other part is in a agent outlet, we also see that there is this tendency that if you see a female operator on the ground, the expectation, built in the society is not that that this particular agent is going to offer complex services. I think we need to work with the clients also in terms of making the marketing and the promotional activities around the agent network, that the gender neutrality, even from the customer perspective, is also very critical. I think we see this more often than not, the social boundaries, cultural aspects that are associated with it. But I think there are, the confidence levels also that are important to be inculcated within the agent network. So we think there are various dimensions to this whole thing. So the experiment that we're doing as a part of this project will tell us a lot of, things that we are all doing different things in different contexts. And we think that more associated financial services are the first things that we should catch on, and then go to the more complex services. That will be the way that I think we can succeed in making the agent networks more viable and more diverse.
Thank you, Sashi. That's very interesting points you just raised. I wonder if we pass to Sunil, who represents BCFI, perhaps with your broader view of the whole, let's say, BCNM community. Sunil, you like to add a couple of points about these challenges of keeping diversifying value services?
Yeah, so I will talk about the delta and not repeat what Shashi has mentioned. Thank you for, first of all, inviting. What I find is very intriguing is the fact that, you today have cash in, cash out, and DMT as the three main services, which account for almost 80–90%. And second observation of the pilot is almost bulk of the agents were dedicated agents. So they did not have other services to do that. Whereas my personal assessment of my experience in Oxygen showed that the viability of BC agent had been much higher if we go beyond just pure financial services, and for which the training requirement is significantly lesser. For example, if you are using cash in, cash out and DMT, you are just specifying the account number and specifying the IFSC code for cash in, cash out, or in case of Aadhaar, you are specifying the biometric and Aadhaar number. What stops? And this is where the challenge, the question you ask, the challenge is that currently the product is a subset of what bank is willing to offer and or bank is willing to promote. So for me, there is no reason why in this particular system, whether it is mobile operated or PC and internet operated, we cannot have a substantial portion of mobile top-up and satellite dish top-up, which is one of the key distribution deficiency. Satellite dish top-up is a distribution deficiency in rural areas. So much so that at one point of time, people were buying set-top boxes and they got 3 months of free plan. And after that, the set-top box was not used at all. They went again to the city, bought one more set-top box because recharge was not available. Now recharge is available, but this also requires practically no training, and the margins are better than financial services. So if you are having the same amount of investment, and if you are using it for services, and I did not see mobile top-up and satellite dish TV top-up, which is part of Bharat Bill Payment Services, available with most banks under part of BC services, that is part of this particular service bouquet. Having said that, I also stumbled across the fact that the LPG under Bharat Ujjwala scheme, the cylinders were supplied to a large number of rural customers, but they did not get the refill. So it is something very similar to the satellite dish set-top boxes, that why can't the one portion is that, yes, there is a higher price. What was 600-700 rupees in 2020 is now 1,000 rupee. So yes, it became a problem of how much money people can spend. But second was ordering. If you can order cylinder refill, that also is something that can be done at BCN. So some of the simple services which actually brings footfall, and then that particular outlet doing just more than financial services is one of the challenges that we are facing. And the moment we bring all these services, there is no reason why the viability is better. The second portion is, I'll very quickly say, 75,000 is the investment that is predominantly liquidity investment. The cost is not 75,000. So the more the liquidity is induced in the system, the more will be the services that can be tolerated, because except cash out, all other services requires pre-funding. And the more liquidity we have, the more we'll be able to do services. Thank you.
Thank you, Sunil. That's those are great points. Perhaps we can move to Mr. Kalyan to hear his perspective on some of these challenges.
So, so my video is not coming properly, so I'm making it off. So thank you very much. Regarding I'll come to regarding what are the business challenges in this. So first of all, I would focus on two parts. One, the BCNM, the BC are selected, are basically from the area where they are not at all ever been exposed to banking or any kind of financial services providing kind of thing. So that is one part, it is completely new to them. Because why I'm saying this, because if we see the total the business portfolio or profile, only 40 to 50% BC contributes the whole business, and rest 50% are not so productive or below that. So that what we see ourselves, only 50% BC are productive only because. So when they join, they understand the banking and kind of thing. So one that has been rightly pointed out, like the training part is very, very much lacking, because since initial only, we only trained them for banking and financial services. Secondly, the bank, which are so target oriented that completely, even if they think of doing something, they are completely occupied by the bank, their targets, their things like that. And it has been happening quite now. like when the DFS pressure on them, they just transfer the pressure to BC agents, and they are basically grappling with the problems like achieving the targets and things like that. There are possibilities like other services, because these BC agents are basically the center point in the village community. So they have good rapport, they have perfectly linkage with the villagers, and people come and trust like anything. So these are the one of the major challenges that we are facing, that in coming days, if the BC income is not increasing on year basis, certainly there are going to be a huge dropout from the BC network agent part of that, because their interest is losing, and the rest, those 50%, those who are not up to the mark, they are a huge risk of at the point of BCNM. So this is very, very important. Like we link them to be the different kind of services apart from financial services, because if you think for the pension, for the insurance, and for the other activities what BC are doing, their income from that side is dismal, very minimal. It is not contributing anything. If you say, to my understanding, it is hardly say 500 or 400 rupees a month. That is what. So it is not at all attractive that what banks are offering. So even if the bank is now asking for loan, so for selecting the loan persons, linking them with the banks and their commission side of this, but still the pressure from the bank to cash in and cash out and the social security scheme is so high that they do not leave any scope, so that is the real problem that we face in that. And BC do want to provide services, like we started with assisted e-commerce kind of thing, and there are a lot of scope there. The e-commerce business can be linked with the BC, and BC can be a good it can be a good income source for them without disturbing the whole financial service system. So that has to be done, where bank are very sometimes very adamant of not allowing BCs to get into other kind of activities. So there has to be some, at the level of the policy level, where BCs are allowed for this kind of activity as well, because those activity, because if you say banks that there are banking business hour and you cannot do any other business during that time, but there are much more times available that can be linked with the other kind of services, which can actually enhance the income of the BC. And recently our experiment with the women BC, that we have impaneled around say 700 women BC agents, those who are SHG members, that they are doing that. They are bringing a lot of business, lot of saving for the bank. So that is very potential part of it, where we can look for, and there is only the bank side, with they allow BC agents to find out the other business activities, that without disturbing the the banking hours, then can be a very good support for the BC agents to enhance their income, because they're like urban BC or semi-urban BC or rural BC, their positions are different, their business things are different, their business environment are different. So every BC has a different kind of activity and different kind of opportunity, business opportunity around the area. So that can be tapped. So yeah, I think that's very important. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Kilian. Perhaps just want to make sure with organizers, do we have a representative from Mandeshi Bank? If not, we can move to the next question. Okay, thank you. So following up, I think you gave a lot of points, we could continue discussing a whole nother hour on these points that you've raised, but we won't have time for that today. However, we take note of those points for further discussion later. A second question that comes to mind, motivated by the GFI report, is that although we've made a lot of progress, India's made a lot of progress in expanding the BC network in rural areas and covering different types of lower income customers. We see, for example, that the majority of BC's customers are now female customers, right? Around 57% is the estimate from the sample of GFI survey. We know that we're learning a lot about these customers, right? These are customers that we don't know very well. It's relatively recent that we start serving them. We know that their livelihoods are mainly dominated by agriculture or micro businesses. So my question to you is, what are some of the initiatives that are needed within your organizations, BCNMs and financial institutions, to really start discovering what are those new additional services of value that we could be adding, right? And I say this because there are some indications that the activity rates of our BCs can be improved, right? As revealed by the fact that about 54% of male BCs and 74% of female BCs in the survey, in the sample of the GFI study, make less than 5,000 rupees per month, right? So there seems to be room for growth in activity and revenue. What are some ideas that you would propose within DFS providers and BCNMs to identify and discover new use cases of value that can, be beneficial for the customer and for providers? Maybe we do another round of thoughts here. Sashi, would you like to start?
Yeah, so there are two ways to think about this. One is, how do you increase the overall reach or footfall for these agents, and how do we make it more accessible to women customers, so that there is that synergy that is always I think one can draw, that a female agent is expected to draw more female customers, and then there are specific needs of those female customers that can be met. So which is an opportunity that can be tapped. For example, there are large women empowerment programs that are going on in the country. This is run by state governments in huge numbers, and almost every rural family is a part of these programs. We call it self-help group programs. These are state rural livelihood missions, wherein a large part of the transactions that happen within these groups, which are all financial transactions, they are saving for themselves, they're borrowing for themselves, they're repaying those loans. And most of these transactions are not recorded in any formal system in most cases. There are efforts being made to digitize all this. But then there are also efforts being made to make some of these women group leaders as BC agents. And when that happens, and there are a lot of studies and World Bank and others leading in this effort in trying to prove the fact that this ecosystem it's in itself is a microcosm of digital banking, opportunity that one can tap into. And some of these opportunities we should find and try and enable those participants who are already in the financial ecosystem, but not in the digital ecosystem. So if you bridge these two, I think there is a lot more that can be not only digitized, but the opportunity becomes much more formal in nature, and agents will start earning a lot more. And that is, I think, an effort that is being made, and progress, I think, is visible. The other way to look at it is, instead of seeing women agent as a separate unit, if you see family as a unit, right? Then the outlet per se can leverage on the opportunity of family members also acting as sub-agents within the outlet. Because for a female member of the family, there are various activities that they perform, and then economic activity becomes a part and parcel of their life. It cannot be a full-time activity in many cases because of the way that families are set up in mostly rural India. So if there is an opportunity that male member of the family or family members also participate in their economic activity, then the overall as a unit, it becomes much more viable. Otherwise, sometimes it becomes restricted in terms of the number of hours an agent can operate, or number of services they can offer, that becomes pretty restrictive. So one is, you can see it as a larger unit rather than a male or a female operating in an outlet. It can be both of them sharing the responsibility and then making it a more viable economic unit for the family. That is one part of systemic level interventions that one can do. The other thing is, I was talking about banking agents being tied to the banking network, which is a regulatory constraint, right? Wherein one bank, one BC is what is practiced in India. And there is this idea that a freelance agent, anybody can become an agent. In East Africa, the biggest success mantra is that anybody could become an agent. There is no real restriction or some kind of a template that is, there must be a light template, but it's not as heavy as we see in India, which also restricts the participation of women in the banking business, right? So if you make it a little bit more lighter, for at least the transactional level engagements, right? It becomes more freelance kind of an agent network, where signing up for becoming an agent becomes a very easier task than going through lots of exams. It's the entry barriers are high even today, because the regulator specifies that within a certain period of time everyone should graduate a certain kind of examination system, which is not necessarily necessary for an entry level agent. Because entry barrier itself is higher, than getting to the next level is becoming even more difficult. So I think it's important to look at how do we make this whole system lightweight, so that the more women get into the system, and then train them to be able to operate complex products and services that can come on the network. I think these two areas, I think, will make it much more open and viable environment.
Thank you, Sashi. These are great points, and perhaps just building on them. Perhaps Sunil, perhaps you can comment a little bit about some of the points that Sashi raised, and add others. But one thing that comes to mind is, how real are the processes that providers have set up in India for their BCs to collect and inform about customer needs and demands, right? Because one thing we hear a lot in the international finance community is that agents or BCs are, that customer-facing representative that is hearing a lot about what customers want, what customer needs. How can providers, leverage on that, and are we doing that in India? And what's your opinion about the viability of doing that and the value of doing it? Maybe you'd like to comment on that.
Yeah, no, clearly, Emilio, I think this is the point I was about to talk about anyway, that it's currently top down. You have services, these services are offered, and you take it or leave it. That's it. So it stops at that. Where my other colleague, Anand Bajaj, he just mentioned in the afternoon a great concept, which I'm sure has enough demand. He talked about the fact that, people have to go to bank branches and show that they are alive for getting the pension. Why can't we do that through Aadhaar? Because Aadhaar shows that it's a person present transaction. It's not a card present or card not present. It's a person present transaction. So whether you do a Aadhaar authentication or you do a Aadhaar cash in, cash out, that's good enough for anybody to, any bank to confirm that, yes, indeed the person is alive. Now, is there a demand for such service? If we scan the rural areas, there will be many. Today, for bank accounts also, what is the interest rate you get on current account? 3.5%. What is the interest rate? And I think by US standard, please don't compare, because European and in those locations, 1.5% is a lot. But typically, if you put it in a mutual fund, which is debt-based mutual fund, you get anywhere between 6 to 7%, which are reasonably secure. Small finance bank also give your savings account interest up to 7%, but the account opening itself will become a difficult portion. Is there a need for anybody to open a bank account and not go for equity, a demat account and not go for equity and go for debt funds to improve savings returns, which are better than inflation? Answer is yes. Is there an option where we can now offer credit without giving paper documents, which actually turns away customers from availing that credit from somebody else who is offering at 20%, 25%? Instead of that, can we use account aggregator model to offer the credit on to any customer? And it could be as small as 25,000 to 50,000, which is not what typically credit is offered by banks, and they're not interested to do those kinds of bank, although bulk of the obligation for small finance bank and many of these banks is to bring down the ticket size of the lending and cannot have much higher one. So while this has not happened, that does not mean the demand is not there. The demand is clearly there for, and I just gave some examples which are very immediately, somebody will say by common sense that yes, this would fly. But if we go into the market and try to do a dipstick on the customer side, because the entire study currently, Grameen, is on the BCNM and agent side. If we do on the customer side that, if we ask customer what are the services they would want to have, probably we'll get a set of parameters and we don't need to do all of them. If we do even their 80-20 ratio, we may get 20% of the services, which will even make a great pain point reliever for customer, and he'll keep coming. And if he keeps coming, he will do other services as well. So that's the point I wanted to bring across.
Thank you, Sunil. Very clear. Perhaps we can hear the perspective of Mr. Kilian. Same question to you. What do you think are some initiatives that providers should do to keep on discovering new use cases or services that are of value for this lower income customer segment that you're reaching more and more in India?
So I think BC's agent, because I'll just go back a little bit, because nowadays there was, as you are saying, that now there is a certification, and now it has come that without you, if you are not certified, you cannot become BC. So that is also happening. So it's a need of a lot of women BC need to first clear their exams, then only they can become the BC agents. Secondly, when BC work, the demand side is certainly very, very high in terms of credit, in terms of aggregating different kind of services. Like recently, the State Bank, which has started now giving aggregating the agriculture credits, that is also going to be big areas in the rural areas, where the agriculture deed is one of the most important thing. And it is fact that the most of the agriculture credit or KCC is not going to the right kind of person we should go. So the BC Agent Network can be a great support in that, then aggregating those kind of services. And once they are connecting, their transactions will be high. Secondly, the right kind of people can be, bring to the bank. So that is, I think, one of the most important areas. Where the need side is that the customer side is the mostly the agricultures. So this is one of the area. Secondly, because most of the income, if you think in the villages, in the rural areas, are basically their income, they are coming from their husband, from the different, so this kind of the monthly things that they are coming, and women are going to this is also one of the reason why most of the women are going to the BC agents, because of the money sent to them through their husbands or on monthly basis. So this is one kind of thing. So at that point of time, I think there is a great demand where BC agents can actually train or actually educate these women on the different kind of financial products, where they can do, and BC as well can earn lot more, income. Initially, there was also, the incentive was given to BC agents for their deposits. So now that this has also not getting into, so that can be also done when they are mobilizing deposits for the bank and they can educating the women. So there are more number of savings around different kind of products that should go. Secondly, as we have tried with the mutual funds through the BC agents, that why not they can do the mutual funds. The biggest problem was their signature never matched with the bank account, and all mutual fund applications are rejected by bank because the signatures do not match. So why not? This can be linked with the Aadhaar itself, the mutual fund with the Aadhaar itself, where they put their thumb and it is linked and the mutual fund starts. Because of that, we have mobilized more than 3,000, and out of 3,000 applications, 2,800 has been rejected because of that. So this is also one of the area where BC agents can also get income of the commission income, and the same time they can be it can be a fruitful preposition for the women. Those, why not they can deposit 500 per month or 1,000 rupees per month for the mutual funds. So that is there. So my perspective is that.
Just of my curiosity, Mr. Kilian, you mentioned the opportunity of aggregating ACT credit and distributed to the BC network. So currently, most of ACT credit being offered by many of the banks is not distributed by BC network?
No.
How do they distribute it then?
So
through their branches?
To the branches, and because of that, BC agents are not getting anything of it. If the BC bank says you mobilize 5 to 50 applications for credit, the incentive is not going to them. So that is not linked actually. So with lot of our efforts now, bank are now linking those inactive accounts or default accounts to their accounts. So with the BC account. So whatever now it has started. So that has created a lot of interest among the BC to collect the loan amount for the banks, because even if how much the collection comes, the income goes to the BC. So in some of the banks, BCs are making 2,000-3,000 per month only because of collecting the loan amount. So that is now happening. So I think once it happens also, that opens up a lot of the scope for BC agents to make some of the income for them. Yeah.
Thank you. Good. Well, thank you very much for all these reactions. Perhaps we need to move into policy implications. But before that, I just want to give a chance to Bobby and Prabhat to any additional aspects you'd like to mention briefly on the provider side that may have not been mentioned yet. If not, we move to more of the policy implications.
Yeah, I think we can move to policy implications. Yes, thanks, Emilio.
Great. Okay, so you've heard all of these challenges, which are opportunities, really, right, for increasing the value and the quality of the BC network in rural areas. My question to you both is, how can donors, government agencies, NGOs help accelerate this process? What are the type of interventions that you are working on and you foresee in the future that may accelerate this expansion with quality? Who would like to start?
Maybe I can go. I'm Bobby Gray, and Research Director for Grameen Foundation. So have had the opportunity of working with the GFI team on this research, but as well as some research across sub-Saharan Africa in the Philippines. And I think one of the things that has struck me, and I appreciate Sashi mentioning it, is really kind of the challenge and opportunity of kind of social and gender norms that happen both for the BC agents as well as for the customers. And one of the things that we've learned through our interactions and research, globally, is that this is kind of a big deal that we haven't paid attention to a lot. One of the things that we learned in Ghana and some of our earlier research, working with different NGOs to onboard mobile money agents, female mobile money agents, is that exactly what Sashi was saying, is that a lot of the households actually run this as a family business, not just an agent business. So even if we're recruiting women, one of the constraints that we found is that anybody who just works with female entrepreneurs in general is that oftentimes they may only have 2 to 3 hours in a day that they're actually doing the business after they do the morning chores, get their children off to school, maybe go to the farm, help their spouse on some of those activities. And then they may have, those hours between lunch and dinner time to actually run the mobile money business. And then they have to go back home and start cooking again for the evening. And so what we found is that even if a female agent is technically the business owner, her spouse is kind of helping her manage some of that. And so some of the questions we've raised is, how do you address kind of those social and gender norms issues in kind of a private sector, business in an approach? And so, some of these things would be difficult for mobile money, a BCNM to actually spend that amount of effort to support that kind of inter-household dynamic of running the business. And so I think that's where NGOs can help support some of that work, whether it's thinking about ways to kind of develop more of a pre-onboarding process, where maybe some of these constraints that we talked about before about women needing to meet different certification requirements, et cetera. And I think that's one area that I'd love to see more work happen, is like, how do we actually do that in a way that's scalable? Or do you have to just really recognize that maybe NGOs and donors can just help support some of those social and gender norms issues? Some of the things that we've looked at is, a lot of these inter-household dynamic kind of dialogue approaches, but those are cost and time intensive, and that wouldn't be very easily scalable, but I definitely think that they're needed. Maybe the only other point that I thought has been really interesting in some of the research was kind of this constraint that you need training, but agents are not satisfied with the more training that they get. And so I think some of what we have to think about is, how do you provide the training that they need to kind of get started, but maybe make it to where when they're experiencing constraint or kind of challenges within the business, that there may be offline training tools, like maybe, how GFI has GLEAP, they might be able to go and seek the information that they need, but they don't need to take 2 hours out of their day to go to training to get that information. So how do we kind of balance the training that they need with the time constraints that also causes? Is just something that I think broadly we have to think about. And I'll turn it over to Prabhat for his.
Bobby, just a clarifying question with the dynamics of social norms that dictate intra-household arrangements. You were saying that there's a big scope of intervention there, but what would be the objective that you're suggesting? Would be basically saying, by changing the social norms that in a way that reduces the amount of burden that women have to have in terms of household activities, would increase the amount of time women have to run a BC business or any other business. Is that did I understand right? That's the overall
yes,
hypothesis?
I think that's one. I mean, obviously, the people in the household, the decision makers, have to have some sort of discussion about, okay, if we want to run this business and we want it to be successful, you actually have to be doing the business to earn these commissions, to provide these services. And so if a woman is going to be the business owner, how does she arrange within her household to increase the amount of time she can actually do that business? The other thing that we've considered, and I know this is such a challenge because I hear it across Grameen all the time, is that, well, we don't want to train. So if we want to increase female agents in the ecosystem, well, then we need to train them. We need to make sure that they own the business. But in reality, when they go back home, that's not what is happening. I mean, their husbands are supporting them. And so how do you make sure that when you're onboarding an agent, maybe you do need to think about their spouse or other household members being a part of that training, so that she's not the only one getting the information and then going home and trying to, you know, teach her spouse how to do it, and make sure that they have that as kind of a collaborative effort versus something that we're all concerned maybe gets taken over by the spouse because of all of a sudden it is, you know, it is profitable and he wants to run it. So I think we have to kind of figure out how to balance the desire to increase female entrepreneurship, you know, within this, but also accept the fact that, you know, they may need to run it as a household business for it actually to be profitable.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Prabhat, over to you for your perspective.
Thanks, Emilio, and thanks, Bobby, for those remarks. In fact, it was wonderful to hear from, you know, all the panelists, and I'll just pick on some of the ideas that I heard, you know, in fact, from Sunil and from Sashi. So Sunil, you know, mentioned about a very, very important aspect. He mentioned that, you know, we kind of talk a lot about the BCNMs, the provider, I think, and we need to focus on the customer perspective. What is it that the customers need? What kind of challenges they face? And he gave example of, let's say, this life certificate, you know, that, you know, pensioners and other people who receive DBTs from the government need to go to the bank or somewhere to prove that they're alive, and, you know, how this service can be just seamlessly done over Aadhaar-enabled authentication. That's just a beautiful example of, you know, new kind of use cases that are there, and there are plenty of them. You know, I'll just give you a couple of examples. So in last few years, you know, all of us, entire world suffered through COVID. And when I had to go and, you know, take my vaccination, it was easy for me to, you know, find the vaccine availability in my neighborhood, book my appointment and go there and, you know, get vaccinated in like half an hour or 1 hour without wasting the whole day. And for the other people who did not have their smartphone, they would queue up at a vaccination center very close to my house, and they would spend the entire day because they could not make that, you know, vaccine find and vaccine booking using a smartphone that they didn't have, or they didn't know how to do that. And, you know, they would have a limited amount of vaccine to be given each day. So many people would, you know, would have to go back in the evening and again come back and queue up the next day. A simple things that can be solved by having, you know, this digital capability which exists in the hand of these agents. I think, you know, we need to remember that these you know, we in India, I think, you know, we do have problem of, you know, over regulation or the desire to regulate anything and everything. But I think we have to remember that the regulator has to regulate the service or services being offered. You cannot and you should not try to regulate or control what that entrepreneur, that agent can or cannot do, right? I visited a common service center a few days ago, you know, and I saw that, you know, this common service center is an agent for Bank of Baroda. It's also an agent for Fino Payment Bank. He's also an agent for 5 other banks, and all of their logos are displayed prominently there. And I asked them, okay, how are you offering service to all of these banks? Because aren't you expected to be exclusive? He mentioned that, no, I have the agency of Bank of Baroda, and I have agency of, you know, in my brother's name, and I have agency of some other bank in my other relative name. So people are able to find out workarounds, which means that the reality is that the customers, you know, in that CSC center's neighborhood, there are customers, you know, who are customers of different banks. There are, you know, dozens of different banks. You can't have a dozen different agents, you know, serving that small neighborhood. So I think it's time that regulators woke up to that reality and realize that, you know, what you need to regulate is the service, not the entrepreneur. You have to open up the entrepreneur and look at what all, you know, possibilities are there. I mean, you think about a rural population, what all kind of services they would need. I mean, today morning I was in a major conference organized by the Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Agriculture, which was around the theme of digitization of agriculture, and they were talking about, you know, 17 trillion rupees of priority sector lending, happening in the country. So just to translate, around $220 billion worth of priority sector lending happening in the sector of agriculture, and yet we have almost 30% of the small and marginal farmers who are not getting access to those credit. Now, is that not a problem that, you know, the bank, the BCNMs or, you know, business correspondents can contribute to in solving? the fact is, you have 130 million, 13 crore, Kisan credit card holders in the country, but it still does not cover a very large number of small and marginal farmers. How can we increase our outreach to those people? So I think as a regulator and for the policy makers, we have to tell them or convince them that put on the customer hat, put on the consumer hat, and look at the pain points of the consumer, what services they would like to access or they would want to access, which they're currently not able to or are able to with a lot of difficulty, and how this kind of BC agent network can help solve for those problems. So I'll pause here.
Thank you. Thank you. So, yes, bigger emphasis on customers, and you've raised very, very important challenges that definitely call for public-private sector collaboration. Maybe going to a next question that is more focused around gender. We see that India has been making some progress in terms of onboarding women BCs, right?
So Emilio, can I just add few points on policy?
Ahead.
Because policy is my favorite subject. So
okay,
I just can't stop talking about it. So basically, I think there are a few things which are very clear. One is that today, India's first 150 million customers who are on UPI don't pay for money transfer. It's free. India's bulk of the customers who are doing cash to bank account remittance pay 1%, and they pay 18% GST. Plus, if the bank is not having GST credit 50%, they actually pay 27% GST. So that's a significantly high taxation. Although the GST regulation says that money transferred to a Jan Dhan account would be exempted, but the current way, and that was being built long back. Now UPI is free for first 150 million customers. It was the legislation was made so that you don't do urban to urban remittance and have zero GST. But now when you have this kind of service where bulk of the urban customers are not even paying anything, forget the GST, it's high time that the entire taxation on financial services, especially for the financially excluded or financially underbanked, needs to be relooked from the provisioning point of view. Otherwise, you are actually putting a very high tax burden on them. Similarly, on BCNM, the moment he exceeds 2 million rupee worth of transaction on AEPS cash out, he comes under the TDS rule, and the bulk of the villages where the VC is sitting, agent is sitting, they don't have their own bank also having a branch there. So to give you a perspective, 2 million BC agents are there, and the PSU banks account for about 100,000 branches in these locations. PSU banks also have about 100,000 agents. So what about with the 1.9 million BC agents? They have to go to branches which are not their own bank branches, and therefore the TDS exemption is not available to them. And suddenly, when you are earning less than 0.5% and you have a TDS of 5%, after some time the BC stops working. So these are some of the things which can be managed, and thankfully DFS has now set up a monitoring committee which includes now private sector banks, PSU banks, BCFI, and NABARD to look into the problems of BCs and come up with the solution for that. So some of these issues which are easy to find would require different kind of mindset to look at it, but that you have 100% free UPI for first 150 million. Why are you bothered about GST for cash to bank transfer, which should be also GST free? So that was my 3 minutes onto this. Thank you.
Thank you. Those are great points, Sunil. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, we'll have hopefully another round of for the DFI representatives to to comment on policy issues. But I just wanted to go to the point around gender. So there's still some journey to go to keep onboarding more women BCs, right? We know that either male or female BCs can serve a lot of women customers, but when it comes to incorporating women into the DFS supply chain, making them BCs themselves, we still have some time to go. I was wondering if Bobby Prabhat can share some of their thoughts in terms of what can donors, governments, and NGOs do to onboard more female women. Some female BCs, sorry.
I mean, I think I've already kind of touched on what I think is one of the bigger constraints is just kind of how we recruit women, how we support them and retain them as BC agents. I think just quickly, since I know we're running out of time, I do think this conversation around the commissions is really interesting. And the point about the non-financial services is also interesting to help supplement the income that agents are receiving, so that maybe we don't try to put all of our eggs in the basket of the mobile money agent, but kind of see it as an ecosystem of entrepreneurship that households generally have. So I think thinking about the other types of companies that have been mentioned, the dish, the satellite, maybe the solar and the energy types of products that are out there, how to onboard those in a way and coordinate the commissions. Because what I've also seen in our experience is that you have to, there's kind of an assumption that this is a seamless ecosystem that an agent works in, but what you find, it's pretty piecemeal, that there's a lot of different things you have to coordinate in terms of how do you develop the right commissions that incentivize both the sell of those by the agents. And so I do think if we can continue to think about how does that support continue for the agents, both in, because I realize there are also constraints for that that upfront investment for a mobile money agent, whether it's how much money they have to put in to actually start that business, is also often a constraint for women that they have to kind of negotiate within their household to get that money. So I think all of those are just kind of the types of things that we can't underestimate as being really important for female agents. And Prabhat, I'll turn it over to you.
Prabhat, maybe just to focus your answer in the last few minutes that we have on, the type of interventions hinted by Bobby, the amount of training that's needed to change social norms, even the amount of training that's needed to specifically onboard female BCs, that's a huge investment. How can you kind of make it happen in the context of India in terms of who will pay for that? What's the type of public-private partnership that you envision can actually get that to scale?
Sure, Emilio, and thanks, Bobby. So on that question, absolutely, investment is needed in training of agents in general, because there's a correlation between their training and their earnings, right? Even if at times they may not be very satisfied with the training itself, and that applies to training of female agents also. I think there is an investment that is needed. And that investment has to come from a mix of, the providers, which could be like your banks, BCNMs, as well as maybe the government, whose agenda is to drive financial inclusion, and maybe the philanthropic donor. And also, I think, somebody else was talking about the time limitation that, female BC agents face, and they are not able to say, or not available to work full time, say 8 hours, but they are happy to, pursue it as a part-time activity, say working 4 hours a day. Now, to make sure that you are able to leverage that 4 hours, I will go back to Sashi's idea that, why can't they have, say, associates or family members who kind of, run part of the business or do the running around. Let's go and, learn from, female BC agents, what kind of challenges they face. And one challenge they would always tell you is that, going to the bank branch for the float management or liquidity management is a barrier that they always face. So can that be introduced as a supplementary service to serve not just female agents, but all agents, because then they can focus on running their business rather than running to the bank to do their float management. Likewise, and one more thing, this is, there is data and research, which kind of shows that, having more female agents is not just a right thing to do, but also a smart thing to do, because ultimately it helps you acquire more customers, more diverse customers, and drive more uptake of your various financial services. So there is a business case obviously out there. But yeah, I mean, in order to get to that business case, you need to make that investment, and that investment has to come from all the different parties. It cannot only be the BCNMs, it cannot only be the banks, but yeah, I mean, a combination of banks, government, BCNMs, and the donors can invest on these. And of course, what I mentioned, that providing supplementary services, business services like float management kind of services will certainly help.
Thank you, Prabhat. We've 2 minutes left. Maybe some last words. Maybe Sashi or Sunil or Mr. Kalyan have anything else to say regarding policy?
So the only other thing that I would add, Emilio, is that there is a lot of work that government is doing to enable a lot of social security schemes, a lot of cash benefit transfers. There's so much that is already happening, right? And most of it is also being digitized. That means one can access those services online. But a lot of them who actually are the beneficiaries don't really know how to access. They probably don't even know whether they're eligible for those programs or not. And BC agents are, again, very good touch points where one can walk in and in fact inquire about what they're actually eligible for. I heard the government releases one scheme every day, but I don't know whether I'm eligible or not. And one would be surprised that each rural family will be eligible for 15 to 20 schemes. They may be enjoying only 1 or 2 schemes or not even that because of the lack of information. So one is enabling that information being available at this outlet. And also if they have to enroll, then that is the next level of service that can be offered. By helping them enroll into the services, the money again comes back to the same amount, same account that the agent is actually going to help them cash out. So there is a complementarity associated with some of these activities that can be brought into one particular umbrella, which, like you said, even for female agents, it's a great opportunity to explore. So some of these things have to come together. I think still the integration is missing, a lot of disconnected stuff going on. So we should work towards trying to integrate the larger service suite into one touch point that will make it viable.
Thank you very much. Well, we're just on time. Thanks everyone for your participation. Thank you, panelists. This is great insights. I'll turn it over to Piyush.
Thank you so much, Emilio. We just have 2 questions that we have picked up from the chat section where they have asked the question. So the first question is, can we make BC viable with their core line of business itself rather than doing non-core business? So can we make them viable only with the banking services, or do we necessarily need any non-core? Anybody can answer.
Well, answer is yes and no. Yes is where there is sufficient demand. So there are dedicated VCs who are doing great business and the footfall they get is fantastic. But it's again 80-20, or I would say in this case 10-90. That the 90% would be looking for other services beyond just financial services. So depending upon how the proximity of customer and customer's requirement are, it is possible to have, and it is already right now working in many places, that a BC is viable and he is in fact doing pure financial services.
My quick response, Piyush, is that you have to know, one is to define what is meant by core. I know Anand asked this question, but what is core to the business is also important. When we say core, we're talking probably about transactions, right? But that doesn't have to be. We have to see whether we can evolve into a more comprehensive financial services platform where the basic offering is transaction, but there's a lot of advice associated with it and a lot of value that gets added to the customer. In that sense, then core business can become viable. But if we're talking about only cash in, cash out as core business, then like Sunil said, it may not be everywhere. So we'll have to broaden the core a little bit.
Anybody else want to respond to it?
Yeah, I'll just add to what Shashi said that, once you add transaction, you are going for not only just digital financial services, but also merchant payment services. Now, if you define merchant payment services as digital financial services, it's a different issue. But if you're talking about only digital financial services as core, then it's the branchless banking services that we are talking about. But I agree with Shashi that a agent can be a merchant. And if an agent is a merchant, then we are talking about not only the digital financial services, but also digital payment services, which makes it viable.
Just last question, I would say it's a more of a policy level question, that tax burden on BC agents is very high. Government has classified this as essential service, which needs to be resolved. Cash carrying risk is, and its cost is mostly on agent, while it should be on principal organization. So any quick response?
Yeah. So I think one portion I have answered on the GST and TDS. The other portion on cash risk, RBI has clearly issued guideline that the risk of cash at BC agent rests with the bank, because the cash at BC agent belongs to bank, but it has not been implemented. So while RBI has very clear direction, the implementation of that has not been correct. Anytime there is any cash risk, the BCNM and BC agent is supposed to take that risk. So while on paper things have been done, but implementation is not to the extent that is required, or I would say rather missing, not even extent. It is rather missing in terms of insurance of cash at BC agents level.
Thank you. Anyone else want to respond to this? Okay, great then. Thank you so much. Handing over to Poorna.
Thank you, Piyush. So with that, we come to the end of today's webinar. And on behalf of Grameen Foundation India and the BEATS team, I extend our gratitude to each one of you for joining the webinar. Special thank you to Emilio for such a crisp and well-rounded moderation. And thank you to each of our panelists for bringing such insightful and such a plethora of sectoral learning concerning the BC industry. So the discussion has been absolutely engaging, and we are receiving the comments in the section of chat as well. So our team will compile all the questions from the audience and share the responses, along with the key takeaway from the discussion over email communication. We can also share the recording of this webinar to those who have requested for the same. So thank you once again, and good night. And thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Have a good evening, good day.
Good
Thank you so
evening.
much.
Good evening.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.